Hey everyone, I'm Jake. I'm the producer of Pioneers. We have a very special episode today, which is kind of a transition episode between season one, which we just wrapped up, and season two, which is going to be launching quite soon. Season one was a fantastic first take at Pioneers. We really appreciate everybody for listening in. But most importantly, we really appreciate all the amazing questions that we received over the last couple of months. So in today's episode, we're going to play a little bit of a role reversal here where I'm going to actually be interviewing Ankur, who is the host that you all know and love and are used to. And we're going to run through the most common questions that we've received over the last few months, both in comments, in DMs, in our emails, and our messages, just about the series itself, but more importantly, about how AI is impacting very highly regulated industries, which, by the way, is the direction that we're going in for season two. So we'll be probing some really actionable, tactical, and specific questions about how AI is starting to play a significant role in spaces like finance and banking, insurance, healthcare. And Ankur's going to be sharing his thoughts on how the technology is impacting each of those spaces, but also how it's starting to be implemented and where ROI is starting to be realized. Without further ado, Ankur, let's get into it. How you feeling today?
I'm feeling great, Jake. I'm very excited for this direction that we're taking. As you said, season one was awesome. Talk about the use of AI across businesses. I think really want to dial in on where AI can be actionable today. Right, the technology will continue to improve, it will evolve, but we want to be really grounded in where AI could be applied in enterprise today, specifically in the verticals that we're really catering to, which is banking, insurance, and healthcare. And we want this to be a blueprint that founders, operators, seasoned executives can use to really go and adopt AI in a way where it delivers ROI within the time frame that they're expecting.
So let's just dive right in. Ankur, I want to ask you the first question, which is probably the most common one I'm receiving, you're receiving over the last couple months. I'm seeing this question all over LinkedIn, all over Twitter, all over my inbox when it comes to newsletters. We're going to start with more vague questions that cover a lot of different industries, and then we're going to get into a handful of questions specific to various high stakes sectors. First, vague question or broad question is, what are people getting wrong these days when it comes to AI?
I think the major challenge with AI is people think of it as a magical black box that can that could basically do everything under the sun. And I get why that happens. I think a lot of people, especially visionaries and futurists, talk about where AI could go and all the wonderful things that AI is able to demo. But I think what is lost in that is where is AI, the technology today, as it applies to businesses? And that might be a different version of AI. So that's maybe a little bit more modest, but also deeply impactful, right? So you really have to think about where is the technology today? Where can it be useful and actionable today, given where it is? And then how do you start applying it so you're getting tangible returns that you need today without worrying too much about where it's going to be 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line? Because while you do want technology to improve and you want to start thinking of ways that you could apply it in the future, most business operators aren't thinking about 3, 4, 5 years ahead, right? They're thinking about AI this year and it needs to be highly actionable. So the big thing is let's focus on what the technology is able to do today and let's apply it in the business areas that you have today where it's going to deliver some value. And let's not get caught up in the hype cycle, which I feel like a lot of people, especially when you look at Twitter or LinkedIn, a lot of them get caught up there.
I think our second question is the age-old question in enterprise, which is, all right, new technology. Should we buy something or should we build it ourselves? Buying versus building. What are you seeing in this space, and what are some considerations for either buying or building at the enterprise level?
I think there's a lot of confusion around this.
Hmm.
And I don't think there's a perfect answer for every org, right? So it really is org specific. So when you look at a company like Google or Amazon, they're definitely building everything in house. And it's because they have deep expertise in machine learning. They've had it for decades. It's a core competency of theirs. And so they're building everything in house, and that guides everything that happens on the product side. But not all, let's say, Fortune 500 companies are equipped to go and build in-house, right? Because machine learning is not in their DNA. They have a great business model. They have great domain expertise, which might be in something like healthcare or construction or banking. But their DNA is not in machine learning. So
Hmm.
for them, the choice is, do you spend a long time building this in-house because it's going to be a core competency and they want to invest in it, knowing that it might take years to go build this properly and they're equipped to go and operate on that time frame and expend enough resources to make it happen? Or is it very important that they get immediate impact from this new technology? By going to a specialized player like Multimodal or some other company out there that just specializes in ML. And by doing that, they basically get a faster ROI in a more confident manner on a shorter time frame. And if they do that, it's not that they're closing the door to building in-house, right? They could certainly build in-house in parallel or perhaps after they buy. And so for them, the sequencing looks like the following. You buy and you use ML expertise where available. And then later on, to the extent that you need to, you start building in-house as well, right? And so you kind of go and mature your way through that cycle. I think a lot of companies, they just don't know what the trade-offs are. And there's also a little bit of a deer in the headlights syndrome, which is they get caught up with trying to make this decision when they should just go make a decision, commit to it, and then really just run with that longer term.
It's actually, I think it's a good segue into our third question, which came to us from a VC, very reputable VC. We're going to keep it anonymous, but they asked, what's different when it comes to AI in the enterprise world versus the consumer world?
So with consumer, there are a lot of really cool AI applications that you could do. Like for example, you could generate really creative images or really creative headshots for yourself, or you could do like synthetic audio or synthetic video, and that's fun. It's playful. It's creative. People will spend dollars on things like that. For enterprise, it's different. It can't be just something that is pretty to look at or looks like cool and is futuristic. It actually needs to drive business value, and it needs to be stable and mature enough where you could rely on it. So think about making decisions on mortgage applications. You can't have AI do this in a way where sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and then you're okay with that, right? The consequences are huge. So you need to adopt AI in a way that's reliable, and you need to know when you can trust the AI, because if AI fails, it's going to have massive financial consequences. In consumer, the stakes are just not that high. So you could have really cool AI features, and if it fails, doesn't matter. Like you get a bad headshot generation or you get a bad synthetic audio, it doesn't matter. The stakes aren't as quite as high, and so you could have more playful features. With enterprise, it's less playful and more grounded in the business operations that they have.
Well, now I got to ask because I'm curious for myself. And I've seen it on the market too. Like on consumer, it seems like, yeah, AI applications, they're a lot more playful, less risk, just probably cheap, a couple bucks, maybe like $10 a month or $20 a month to use this tool, or like a one-time fee. Whereas, yes, in enterprise, it's much higher. I'd even say higher impact or higher leverage capability with AI, or much more risky as well. Have you seen anything in consumer though, whether it's just one or two, that's like actually super high leverage, really high impact that an end consumer? I mean, of course, aside from like ChatGPT, which
Yeah.
is often more consumer facing, but it's kind of more vague and just you could take it anywhere. But a specific consumer application that is really impactful. Are there any that do come to mind just as a case study?
That's a great question. I think the ones that come to mind are mostly around content generation, which is where I think consumer AI is really focused. So even ChatGPT, you're asking questions, you're getting responses back. Maybe you have to generate an essay or a resume or a job description. I think that's where it's strongest, is content generation. I think in consumer, we spend a lot of time generating content for ourselves, right? Whether it's I think resume is a great example, but there are other things that we do as a consumer that you could just use AI for. And I think the killer applications are mostly in that realm. I think that the adjacent applications in enterprise, just to give you a little bit of a preview on this, is a chat GPT, when it fails, like you're like frustrated, you're like, oh my God, why didn't it get it right? Let me ask it again to see if it could give me the right response. But if it ultimately fails, it's not high stakes. But imagine that same experience, a chat GPT like experience in enterprise, where you ask your question on your account balance. Let's say you have an investment portfolio,
Yeah.
and the AI gives you the wrong answer, right? And it gives you the wrong answer in a way that it like really whiffs. Now all of a sudden, you as a consumer are panicking. You're afraid. You're like what's going on, right? Like the consequences are just so much more massive. And so the impact of failure is way higher in enterprise versus consumer. And that's
Yeah.
why you could have a beautiful application that does really well in consumer, and then if you adopt that same application in enterprise, it could just be a massive failure because the odds and the stakes are much much higher in enterprise than they are in consumer.
Yeah, it's a funny example. It brings up a quick story that I'll digress for a moment. But I have a friend, we were talking the other day, and he asked me a question. He's like, hey, I need to start a new business entity. I'm starting to bring in new revenue through various different places. Some are through investment dollars. So he has capital gains. And his question was like, is it best that I do an LLC, an S Corp, or a C Corp? And do you have a good lawyer that you could recommend
Yeah,
that I talk to for this? And I was like,
yeah.
dude, ask ChatGPT. Like, you don't necessarily need a lawyer for that. Sure, you could look it up on Google, Investopedia, or any of those sites. I was like, give it a try. And he's like, oh, that's a good idea. And he asked ChatGPT, and we're like, it gave a great answer. He's like, holy shit, this is really
Hmm.
specific and pretty damn smart. And then I was like, I don't know if that's right. And so then I sent it to my lawyer, and he's like, that is not right.
Yeah,
That could have been a very dangerous scenario had he just trusted it right out of the gates. But I feel like 3 months ago, 6 months ago, when ChatGPT was new, it was right. Now it's making mistakes. I don't know. But yeah, I think you make a great point of like, yeah, the stakes are higher when there's bigger consequences involved, which is a scary thing. And I think what's the solution to that? Is it to work with a trusted team of engineers or advisors on this, or is it that you just shouldn't use AI at all?
I think the answer is a nuanced one, which is I think to build trust in an enterprise version of this, and let's just assume it's healthcare or legal. I think both of them are great, which is like high consequences if you get it wrong. You want to make sure that a ChatGPT like application, so conversational AI is the term we use. You want to make sure that conversational AI solution is grounded with really great information. So it's less likely to hallucinate. It's less likely to use like public knowledge to give you the right answer. Like let's say for a healthcare diagnosis, it's using what your individual team uses. So your practice, your medical practice, uses to give the right answer. And you also want to be able to trace how did the model give that answer in the first place. So it drew upon that knowledge from somewhere. So if you have the document and you're able to trace where that information came from, you start building trust as an end user. And that's exactly how we build these conversational AI agents for our customers in enterprise is we give them visibility as to how the answer was derived. And if the answer is wrong, at least you know why the model got it wrong. Was that the underlying documents had the wrong answer? Was the model confused between two conflicting pieces of information? Because it allows then the person that is responsible for the solution, whether it's multimodal or the client, whoever it might be, to go and fix it, right? So trust is a critical aspect for these like mission critical applications that need to get built. You certainly don't want to get the wrong healthcare diagnosis or the wrong legal advice, right? And if you do, you want to be able to understand like why did it get it wrong in the first place, so you could actually improve it over time. You also mentioned instability. So obviously there's been instability with OpenAI and their models because they release new models, make changes. No one's really clear what changes happen when. And so something that was working could start breaking and you might not have any idea, right? So there is instability in the entire model in the first place. And that's a very, very scary scenario for companies that are basically doing serious enterprise applications.
I had that happen one week. I mean, we use my company, we use an AI model that we built to help us take podcast transcripts and draft articles out of it. And then we have humans finalize those articles. And there was that one week where ChatGPT like updated their whole library, everything
Yeah.
broke. And I was like, crap, I have like 6 articles to write and normally 1 hour. I have 3 hours to get it done. I'm
Yeah.
screwed here. That was a scary day. Um, let's bring it back to Earth a little bit. So I think this is a very broad but really relevant question. I'm curious if you can break it down into various parts
Mhm.
and nuance here, which is, and we've gotten this question in so many different forms from so many different types of people, and I'm going to kind of summarize it into one. Ankur, how should I think about where to actually apply AI within my organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that dovetails in with what I was speaking of earlier, which is we need to consider where AI is good today. And given that, we need to decide which areas to apply it. The area that we see the greatest opportunity to apply AI within an organization is in automating what I would call middle and back office functions that are being done by people today. A lot of the time, people doing these functions consider the work that they're doing grunt work. right? They're doing manual data entry as an example. They don't want to be doing manual data entry because they're highly skilled individuals that would be doing more valuable things in the org if they had enough time to do it, but they were getting stuck doing data entry or data verification. AI is really good at some of those automation tasks. So AI takes the heavy lifting, automates those manual middle and back office functions. It changes the roles of these individuals, but these individuals end up doing more higher value work. And it only makes sense to automate an area like this if you have enough volume. So typically what we'd like to say is that if you have 5 or 10 people doing a workflow, like a middle or back office function, that is likely something you should automate, because by automating it, you reduce the amount of people that are necessary down to like 20% of the headcount, right? So you're able to see a massive increase in productivity and efficiency by reducing the number of people doing that workflow down to a much smaller number. You also have to make sure that the process that you're automating is something you could document, right? So I think Wayne from ISG on a previous podcast mentioned this, and I agree with him, which is unless you could document something, it's going to be very hard for an AI to automate it. So make sure you have this on paper where you could use you could train an AI to do this well. Frankly, you need to use this. You need to have something documented to train a human well. So it's the same thing to train an AI well. You need something documented. The other big piece is um, conversational experiences, right? So you can introduce conversational experiences within an org to allow end users or even internal users to get answers that they need faster. Typically, you would have needed data analysts or research analysts to go find the right document or right database to go and pull information from. That ability to query data, whether it's database data or document data, is much, much faster. So using AI to get answers that you need, so think of like a ChatGPT like experience for your organization, that is one major critical win. And the last bit is for your engineering team, which is they can basically write code faster, review code faster, comment on code faster by using AI. So it's an amazing area of opportunity when applying AI within the org.
There was something you touched on there, which actually aligns with our next question. So a great segue again. And this came up a lot. This topic came up a lot in season one, probably like half a dozen times across our 12 episodes. And I see it all over the web. The question of, Ankur, in your opinion, is it better for me to reduce my headcount to then increase the margin and use AI instead of humans, or maybe even hire less people in my next hiring sprint? Or should I focus energy and resources on keeping headcount, same as we had before, but training these people to now increase maybe 5x or 10x or 100x their output and their productivity?
Great question. Yeah, I think a lot of people think AI is just about displacing or replacing people, and that's not necessarily true. I think for the majority of people in roles, it is going to augment what they do. So let's say 70% of people in a role, they're actually going to be better off with AI because it's going to actually make them better, faster, and more productive. And frankly, they're going to add more value into the org because they're good at their job. They have deep domain knowledge. And by getting more of the grunt work done using AI, automating that away, they get to do more of the higher value work. And frankly, those individuals are really hard to hire, really hard to train, really hard to keep. So no org, no business operator will want to go and replace them, right? Because they're such valuable individuals to the company at large. For the bottom 30%, it may mean that that their role is reduced in some capacity, or maybe that role is eliminated. Maybe for the organization as a whole, it might mean that they're hiring fewer people, right? That certainly could be possible. But that's going to be less the case because when we talk to organizations, especially in the industries that we cater to, like banking and insurance, they're having a real difficult time hiring qualified people in these roles, right? Like underwriting functions and claims processing. It's really hard to hire. It's really hard to train and keep those individuals. And so they're trying their best to hire enough people, and they just can't. And so AI is actually going to fill a void that the hiring is not able to. It does mean change for everyone involved, right? The bottom 30% sees a change that might be a little bit more consequential for them. The top 70%, they see a change, but hopefully it's a net benefit to them long term. So change is definitely going to be there, but for the most part, it's like doing math with a calculator, whereas before you had to go and do that on paper, right? It's just going to be a net value add that when people look at it years from now, they would be like, wow, I can't believe we used to do things the old way.
That is a great analogy, the paper versus calculator. So simple. Can't believe I haven't heard that one yet. I feel like that would have been like a stage one analogy a year ago. So let's shift gears a little bit. We got a really good question in an event recently from an executive in the banking world. And this person asked, how can AI help us make better decisions faster, specifically in things like underwriting, claims processing? And so I'll further that question a little bit. Can you touch on your answer there, but um, using AI, like what can AI do in this space? How fast can it deliver results? What's the net outcome in ROI?
Hmm. Yeah, so I think let's talk about underwriting, right? So typically in an underwriting workflow, regardless of whether it's in banking or insurance, it requires the user, the applicant, submitting documents to corroborate their identity, their income, right? Because ultimately you're doing some sort of credit assessment, um, and that requires classifying the document, extracting information from the documents, for example, income data from pay stubs and bank statements and tax returns, or identity information from passports and driver's licenses, and then basically making a decision given that income that's submitted and identity that's submitted. So you're corroborating information across several documents. You're corroborating that information, um, basically. Beside, I guess, really in conjunction with the application that they filled out. So just like verifying a whole lot of information. That is an area that is very clearly automatable with AI. So AI can classify the documents, read the documents, corroborate identity, income information, and even get to a decision, which is should the application be approved or denied. And in some cases, it might need human review, in which case the AI is just basically routing it to a human, but with a little bit more context, right? But by doing that, you're basically making the experience for the applicant much better because now they can get basically a decision made within minutes as opposed to days. Sometimes it takes weeks to get decisions, by the way, in underwriting, right? So you're reducing the time to decision to minutes, which is a better experience for them. And the underwriting company, the team there, gets a better chance of closing the applicant. Because the faster you are at getting a decision out, the more the applicant is engaged, which means the odds are better that you close on them. So it's actually revenue impacting at the end of the day, and not just a cost reduction play and an efficiency play. So it helps both the revenue side of the house, and it certainly helps the operation side of the house, and it helps the product side of the house because it's a better product experience. You have just better NPS scores and such. Um, in terms of ROI, that's a really important question because I think a lot of companies that look at AI don't get ROI. That's unfortunately the cold truth. And I think Wayne at ISG iterated this, which is like 90% of companies actually don't get ROI when they use AI today. And it's because they maybe they pick the wrong area to apply AI, or they apply AI improperly, or they have expectations that can't be met with where the technology is today, or people get disillusioned because the cycle to get ROI is so long. And this is where I think the buy versus build comes in, right? So if you're building in house, you may not have the know-how and scar tissue to build AI well, and so you're making mistakes that then prevent you from getting any ROI. So you're spending $500,000 or $1 million, you're getting nothing for it. So buying versus building, really careful decision that you need to make. But the idea here is you want to get ROI fast, usually in 3 months or less, because that then encourages you to continue investing in AI. And it also means that the champions that were championing AI feel a sense of they feel good about the decision investing in this space, and allows them to make more confident, maybe more aggressive decisions in future AI investments. So get that win early and fast by picking the right problem to work on, scoping it down adequately, building technology given where the technology is today. So not like having crazy expectations, and then getting the first version of whatever AI you have out into production within that 3 month time frame. We obsess about that with our customers. We really want to help them figure out what use case to focus on, what scope down version of AI to build it super fast, get that value, make sure they feel confident about their decision to invest in this new technology, and then we use that as a launch pad to go do more, right? So picking and choosing to get ROI quickly is super critical.
Can you share, by any chance, any case studies or notable experiences recently of how you brought ROI very quickly? I almost want to call it like quick wins, but that's not
Mhm.
the best way to frame it. I think it's more time to value or time to result. What have been some recent scenarios where you had a really fast time to value?
Yeah, that's a great question. So We had a previous guest on this podcast, Jim from Direct Mortgage, and I think he talked about it during that podcast. So all this is public knowledge. We worked on pay stubs. That was one of the first things we worked on together. And frankly, I think he actually thought we would just fail because he tried to solve this problem many times over the past many years and couldn't solve it well enough. So he threw this problem, gave us about 6 weeks to go and see if we could solve it for him. We came back up in about 4 weeks' time with a solution there, and surprised him, right? So we were able to classify pay stubs and extract key value pairs, so essentially the information that pay stubs have, regardless of whether they're from ADP or Prime Pay or one of the other pay stub providers. We were able to handle variability in the pay stubs to get the information out that he needed via an API, ready to be integrated into his software. And so that was a quick win on the span of weeks, showing that AI is mature enough to handle a problem like this and that we are the right provider in delivering that solution. Once he saw that, we just expanded that relationship, right? So now we're working on 200 plus documents. We're moving away from just document extraction to actually making instant decisions, what we call decision AI. So making underwriting decisions within minutes, basically getting to the point earlier, which is we want the customer, the applicant, to get a decision within minutes, not days.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, I remember meeting Jim, and we did that episode a while back. Behind the scenes, what was his reaction like when you delivered this in 4 weeks? When he was like, "I'll give you 6, good luck," and before that, he couldn't solve the problem at all.
I think it was just like a very gleeful surprise. Like I think he was really surprised and pleasantly surprised by this. And I think he really congratulated us. Like he saw that what we were doing was special, was different. He basically says even to this day that no one is doing what we're doing for customers, right? In terms of really applying AI and getting ROI pretty quickly. So I think it was blown away. I think it was just the exact response that you want. Like for me, I get a huge rush out of it because that's the exact response you want from a client that you work with. You feel good about the value you've delivered. They feel really great about the value you've delivered. And then you're able to just build a really long-term partnership, right? And that's exactly what we do with Jim and other clients that we have today.
Awesome, amazing. So same question, but let's kind of shift focus a little bit more to specifically in insurance. So underwriting and claims processing, kind of a different ballgame with insurance than it is in finance in general. How is AI impacting the insurance sector right now?
So the insurance sector is very fragmented, right? So there are a lot of different companies that exist in insurance, the different carriers, the different types of insurance policies you might get, like life insurance and home insurance and auto insurance and others. And there are a lot of people that are intermediaries, like the different brokers, the people that do the administrative functions, like processing applications for underwriting, handling claims processing. So some of these are pure, what I would say, BPO functions where they're just doing operational work. And for us, we could go in and, the big win with AI is that it could automate some of the very manual, repetitive things that people are doing. Because the whole idea was that this is middle and back office work that you don't want to use, let's say US labor to go do because it's too expensive and hard to find. And so you offshore it to places like India or the Philippines. So you bring the cost structure down, but it's still a lot of friction, very error prone, very hard to hire people and train them and keep them there. And AI is able to do a lot of that work really well, right? Because basically you could feed to a model the same context that a person gets. So they get the same application. They know basically how to extract information from those applications from previous successful applications that were processed. And the model gets really good, just like a human gets good over time. And then it's able to do that. So it automates that very manual repetitive function. And that's on the the BPO side and improving the cost structure. But then there are also other applications in insurance that are really important. So when you're applying for insurance, you actually don't know what type of coverage you need. Or you might not know what level of coverage you want, right? Is it $1 million policy? Is it $100,000 policy? Is it more? You don't know what your deductibles are necessarily without reading the fine print. You don't know basically what the renewal periods are, what the how many people are covered or what type of incidents are covered. And this information exists. Like insurance carriers, the underwriters and such, they have this information to provide you. But it's stuck in a 50 or 100-page document. So the challenge there is, can you deliver a conversational AI that can answer the question that you have as an applicant and do that within seconds? And also get to the right answer, not just to get to any answer. As we were saying earlier, you want to make sure the responses are grounded and you want to be able to pinpoint exactly where in the insurance policy document did you ultimately get the answer from? So you have confidence in what's being derived. So that's another great area. And that is not a cost reduction play. It's mostly a revenue enhancement play. So by answering the applicant's questions successfully and quickly, you have a better chance of doing business with that applicant. And you have a better chance of retaining that customer. So customer success is really critical here because Geico, for example, is famously known for handling claims really well, and it's able to have really good customer retention. Right? We want to enhance the ability of players like Geico and others to have really good, beautiful user experiences so they retain customers for longer.
So our last little segment here will be about healthcare. So a couple of specific spaces where healthcare, there are a lot of manual processes. We got asked this question from a healthcare executive recently as well, which is, we look at areas like pre-authorization, filing a claim, like seeing if a procedure is covered. Can AI impact these things for us? And if so, like, where do we start? What should we expect to come out of it? What do you think there?
Yeah, I mean that's a phenomenal question, and I think it's surprising because like now we've covered banking and we've covered insurance, and there are similar threads with healthcare. There's a similar tone to this, which is for pre-authorization and seeing whether a policy or prescription is going to be covered, and just getting that over the line. You're basically having to call people to get to the right answer, right? Or you go through like chatbots, and it's hard to get the right answer from the chatbots. The goal is that AI can reduce this friction of communicating. And so you get information faster by querying via a model the context that you need, and then get that response back. So, for example, if you have an insurance policy, you shouldn't have to spend so much time to see basically what procedure is covered and then how much of the procedure is covered, how much of it is out of pocket or not. That information is in your insurance document, which again is like a 50-page document that you're not going to read because there's so much fine print. But if you could query a model and the model can give you the right answer, it will speed everything up. And this is not just for the underlying individual that is looking to ask the question. This is for all the intermediaries, right? So the person that is at the front desk at your medical practice, instead of having, forcing them to call the insurance provider, they can just query the model that the insurance provider has provided to ask a question of the model, and they get an instant response back, and then they give you the answer that you need, right? Same thing with like rejection handling. So you get a procedure that's denied, or you get a prescription that's denied. You have a question as to why it got denied, and you actually think that maybe it should be covered and whatnot. This is just again a communication problem with models are really well equipped to handle. And so having a conversational AI do this is going to be a huge benefit. We see healthcare practices adopt this, and the ones that do have a huge leg up against those that do not. The other area is there's a document area, which is you have a bunch of billing statements that are submitted, and you're trying to process that for reimbursement, let's say. Right now, there are teams of humans overseas that basically read these documents and process the reimbursements. A lot of that can be done programmatically through AI. So AI is able to give you an instant reimbursement. They send a ACH to your bank within minutes or within days, right? But not like 2-3 weeks, which is pretty common practice in the industry, unfortunately.
So before we wrap up here, really curious for just broader call to action. Anybody who's in a largely manual, potentially ready to disrupt industry, especially executives in these places, what do you want them to walk away with if it were one or two things when it comes to how they can think differently about AI in general right now, what they should be aware of, maybe something to be more cognizant or cautious of? What do you think?
Yeah, I think my biggest piece of advice is identify the areas where you think AI should be applied in your business. Have like what I say is a descending set of areas where you think it could be applied. Then get that list validated internally or through partners and external vendors like Multimodal that can go and help them come up with a more prioritized list. Now all of a sudden you know the areas where AI could be applied, and then I would say do a lot of pilots and POCs, right? That are short term in nature, so they're on the order of 2 to 3 months, and find the way to get ROI on one of the top prioritized areas fast. Once you have that win, you'll have more confidence, then go invest in more areas. This happened with Jim at Direct Mortgage, who was on the podcast. He mentioned his experience working with us on this. This also happened with Byron from Talent, who was also on this podcast, mentioned the same thing. He invested in a couple of areas, found value, and then massively scaled up the investment. Right. So if you get that first win super fast by doing POCs with a couple of companies, whether internally or externally, in one or two areas in the business where the ROI could be tangible, and you get that ROI, you'll have the confidence to go and invest in this a bit more. what I would dissuade you from is trying to think of AI as this like big 3-year play and trying to come up with like these very audacious, very futuristic versions of AI for your org, because that's not grounded, that's not actionable. You won't get ROI that you need fast enough, and frankly, you and others that are involved will get disillusioned. I don't want that to happen. And I think it will happen to some extent because we're in this big hype cycle. So I'm really trying to guard people against that right now.
Love it. Ankur, how can people get in touch if they want to learn more from you, learn more from Multimodal, and maybe even do a project together?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I think personally, I've been a huge evangelist of machine learning, having been in space for about 10 years. So I do one-on-one personal workshops with business executives that, regardless of what happens on the multimodal side, I just want to make myself available as an asset. What I get out of it is I get to learn a little bit more about how operators are thinking about AI and where they get stuck. And the benefit that you'd get is you'd learn a little bit more about how to think through prioritization, how to think through investment in this area, how to get ROI that you need fast enough. Frankly, I did that for Vista's portcos when I exited with a startup in 2018 and was helping Vista's portfolio companies adopt NLP in 2019. So I have a long history of advising companies in this area. So that's one way. The other way is, if you're thinking about opening up relationships with vendors that could help you basically adopt AI faster on the time frame that makes sense for you. Multimodal does exactly that, right? We build AI agents for our customers in the industries we talked about, banking, healthcare, and insurance. We build them fast, so in months, and we get ROI in months. And so we can certainly help at least scope out what that activity looks like, and that gives you another option in that buy versus build decision. And you can find more about us at multimodal.dev. That's .dev. And we'll put in the show notes there as well.
Awesome. Ankur, thank you so much. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, Jake, appreciate the time. Thanks for having me.